Hello, and welcome to episode number 216 of the Lines Podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined by Brad Allen, Stephen Andress. You can follow them on the Twitter machine, and you should, at Brad Allen NFL, at Stephen Andress 1. You can follow me at Matt Brown M2. And we are talking golf this week, only golf. It is the Megapod here for the U.S. Open. Boys, I'm pretty excited about this one. I mean, listen, full field event with a very hard cut to make here. We're talking 150 plus golfers, but only 60 and ties make the cut. So that is going to be pretty interesting as we start to maybe any placement market bets that we're looking at and all of that, because again, those are all things that certainly play into our handicap here. Just to get some opening thoughts, and then I'll do kind of the course breakdown here of the Country Club in Brookline, Massachusetts. Let's just start with a general question here before we actually start to break down the field. Brad, how did you treat live golfers this week in your handicap? Did you look at them any differently than other golfers? Did you just do a straight handicap? It didn't matter if the guys played last week or any of the stuff that's going on off the course or whatever. How did you go about it?
I have not backed any live golfers, but I feel like I don't really back those golfers anyway. I mean, if you think about it, there's probably a reason they're giving up, like the PGA Tour, right? They're either a little bit past it, like DJ or Phil, or maybe your Pat Perez, or they're never going to compete anyway, like Pat Perez. So I didn't sort of set out to go, I'm not backing Louis Oosthuizen this week, but. Yeah. I haven't backed any of them.
Right. So, Stephen, Brad's answer is pretty much my answer, right? It's like, these aren't guys I typically bet really anyway, right? Like, I haven't been on Bryson in a super long time because of all the injury stuff and everything with that. I've never really been on a DJ backer as it is anyway. And then the rest of the guys are either, middle tier golfers that I would have never have bet as it is. So, like, it didn't really affect me all that much, other than I certainly am going to pray that here in Vegas, they put up some head-to-heads against Phil Mickelson just so that I can attack him. That's about the only thing for me that I did, maybe differently with any of these golfers.
I have found one way to fade Phil Mickelson. We'll talk about that a little bit later, because I've found what you found, that they're hesitant to put any head-to-heads up as we record this on a Tuesday before round one on Thursday. But, I'm with you guys. I mean, they've only played one live event. For the most part, the data services that we use have all the rest of their PGA Tour events before they defected and went over. So we still have a pretty clear picture at this point in time of what these guys are doing, what their recent form is. And sans a 220-1 shot on Kevin Na, like, that's the only outright I've added of the Rebel Alliance and the Saudi retirement fund. So other than that, nobody really popped for me. Kevin Na popped a little bit, and at 220-1, I threw a little lunch money on it, but nothing really serious to consider. Even a guy like DJ, who's floating towards 50-1 at this point.
Yeah, and again, it's just, for me, it's just a recent thing for me. Like, I don't like DJ's game. I don't like what he really brings to the table here. So it is the Country Club in Brookline, 7,260 yards. It's a par 70, just two par fives on this course here. One is likely gettable, and two, the other most likely everybody will lay up to get to. 8 par fours that measure 450 yards or longer. This, whenever you hear 7,260, you're going to say like, oh, well, this seems short. Well, just remember, Torrey last year was a par 71. So there was an extra par 5 over at Torrey, which does get it longer. Now, that said, Wingfoot is a par 70 set up, and it was 7,469 yards. So it did play a full 200 yards longer over at Wingfoot than we're going to be getting at Brookline. Small greens, tight fairways. It's the 6th smallest greens on tour, 82 different bunkers, water in play on 4 different holes, blind shots into greens and things like that. And of course, as with every US Open, thick, nasty rough. There's going to be rocky terrain as well. So if you miss too far, not only with your drives, but also around the greens, there's some of these little rocky patches and things like that. You could end up with really, really bad positioning and or unplayable balls. As we mentioned, 156 golfers, 60 in ties are going to make the cut. 15 different amateurs did qualify for this event. So take that for what you will. As far as weather, we really only care about Thursday, Friday, because we want to know if there's an AM, PM kind of advantage or whatsoever. It looks like it could rain on Thursday, but it looks like it's going to rain all day long. And it doesn't look like the wind really shifts, at least in the weather reports that we're getting as of Tuesday right now, Tuesday afternoon. It doesn't look like there's a big wind shift in one way or the other. So it doesn't look like there's an advantage to go morning or afternoon. And as far as the weekend goes, we can't predict that anyway. So it's nothing we really care about. We just need our guys to make the cut. So as far as I see right now, I'll ask, maybe you guys saw something differently. It doesn't look like there's going to be any sort of weather advantage when it comes to all of that. So let's kick things off here. And Brad, I want to start with you and just look at the top of the odds board here and just get your general thoughts on the guys at the top. I mean, when we look here, after Rory wins last week, he becomes the betting favorite this week. Best odds you can find on him, 11-1 right now. If you want to bet Rory to win this thing. After that, it gets to Justin Thomas. Jon Rahm, who we have talked about multiple times on this pod, is just too short to bet because he had gotten down in this 8, 9, 10 range. Because of the success of Thomas and Rory here lately, Rahm falls to 15. There was even a 17 available for a while. That got snatched up. But Rahm goes to 15, Scheffler at 15. And then once we get past those guys, you get into kind of the low 20s in Schauffele and Cantlay. So we'll cut it off here at kind of like the 25-1 Cam Smith, Schauffele, Cantlay, 25-1 and shorter. How did you view these guys? Did any of these guys make your card? Did you avoid them for strictly the number? What do you think about this tier right here?
I did not bet any of the top five or so. The first person that made the card was Xander Schauffele.
Okay.
I would say McIlroy and Thomas just too short. Rahm, he's more interesting than those two for me. Yeah. Because the US Open form, the long and straight off the tee, all the stuff you would want. But again, 15 for someone who's not been the world number one. He's not been on the same form as he was coming into this event last year, for example. So again, 15-1, I was willing to swerve him. Cam Smith, another one around 20. He was one I'm against because he's just not accurate enough off the tee. There's all this talk around the rough. Everyone knows the US Open setup. And Cam Smith for me is the one who's going to be the most penalised by that rough, even if he's going to scramble better than anyone. But I just think he's going to be in too much trouble off the tee.
Yeah, so kind of the same thoughts for me here. I did catch a Justin Thomas 17-1. So that's the shortest number guy that I have on my card. Now, again, I have no advantages at all in this whole world to you guys when it comes to golf betting, other than the fact that there are some rogue numbers when it comes to outrights here in Nevada. That is about it. That's the only thing I'm ever going to get. And some good outright numbers do come out, and I was able to get JT at 17-1, which I thought was just a little bit too egregious there on him at 17-1. But a lot of the same thoughts with me, Stephen, as Brad had. I mean, listen, is Rahm way more appealing at 15 than at 10? Obviously. But I think, again, if he was in Rahm form, we wouldn't get him at 15, despite no matter how good Rory or JT or Scotty Scheffler or any of these guys were playing. And so even though he is sitting at 15, it's still just not something I can bite on, and it's crazy to think that this is a guy that, again, the odds were 33% shorter just 2 months ago. Every single tournament he rolled out at 9 or 10-1, but still just nothing I can get on. And I agree on Cam Smith. He's a guy that I've actually gone and tried to play some head-to-heads against as well, because, even if he wanted to try to play less than driver here, he's not accurate with his 3-wood. Like there's not a thing here that really suits him. And you get off in this rough, and you get off maybe even into this out of bounds and things like that. I mean, it doesn't matter how good he is around the greens, and he is an absolute wizard around the greens, but it doesn't matter how good he is around the greens if by the time he gets up there, he's already shooting 3, 4, or 5.
I'm with you. Listen, I don't think I can sit here and give a good argument for eliminating any of the top 4 guys on the board that are shorter than 20-1. They're there for a reason. They fit the U.S. Open criteria that we were looking for. I ran my numbers this week, and over the last 50 and 36 rounds, all 4 of them show up in the top 10, regardless of what time period you're looking at. The question becomes, do you want to play a number shorter than 20-1, or do you want to maybe get one of these guys in the 20 to 30-1 range that have very similar profiles, as it turns out, for this particular course setup and the stats that we're looking at? I will tell you that I have not bet any of the guys that are shorter than 20-1, but I have a unit or so set aside to possibly add Scotty Scheffler. The fact that he has drifted a little bit with the emergence of Rory and Justin Thomas means we're getting a better number than we've seen. And I'm not sure he's done anything to warrant having a worse number than these guys with all of the wins that he's piled up just a couple of months ago. 2 events ago, he finished runner-up at the Charles Schwab Challenge, still finished top 20 at the Canadian Open last week despite a cold putter. So I'm not sure he should be the 4th choice in the odds for this U.S. Open. The one thing that I want to mention that I think is very different in this U.S. Open than the past few years is the fairways that you initially mentioned, Matt, and in particular the first 2 majors of this season as well, with Augusta and also Southern Hills at the PGA. Very wide fairways. No rough at Augusta National, really set up nicely for bombers. It's not that just the fairways are narrow here, but there's really penal areas, whether you hit the wrong side of the fairway and it rolls into the water, or not just long rough, but if you miss the primary rough, then you're in some fescue like link style over across the pond where it's near your knees. So accuracy off the tee mattered a lot more to me in this U.S. Open than it has in the past few, and also the first couple of majors this year. So that brought more guys into play into that top tier for me, not just those top 4 that we talked about, but the Xander Schauffele's, but the Shane Lowry's that I'm considering at the top of my card this week.
So those guys, listen, the guys at the top, they do every single thing well. So we're not really worried about that too much. Rahm's short game has been off lately, but that's not typically a weakness of his. So I imagine he will get something figured out here sooner than later. So Brad, now that we get to this middle tier, what type of golfer, what type of profile were you looking for in a golfer this week? Because this is really where people start to fill out their card this week. I've seen a lot of different, like basically every name that we're going to talk about here pretty soon is somebody that somebody has talked up this week and or has on their card already. So why is this middle tier so incredibly popular? What type of golfer were you looking for as you went in to start to build the card?
Yes. So on the tick list here, on the short list of things I want is Elite Scrambler, right? That's something that, however you slice the data at the US Open, it's more important than pretty much any other event because you have to scramble. Like it's going to be tough. You're going to miss greens, so you're going to have to scramble. And if you don't do that, you're not going to win. So I've bumped that up high. I've bumped, as you were just saying about the fairway and the rough, I've bumped up driving accuracy and greens in reg over driving distance. I don't have any driving distance. I mean, I've got some SG off the tee in there, but no specific driving distance. And then long irons. Again, you are going to have to lay up just to hit the fairway on some of these, and there's a lot of dog legs out there. So proximity from 175 to 200, and then proximity from 200 plus is both in there. So essentially, great long irons, great around the green, and hitting fairways off the tee.
Yeah, Steven. So for me, a lot of the stuff that Brad was going after, I made a very much more in-depth model than I typically make for golf tournaments. Same. I think a lot of times, I think the more you get into this, like the more you can kind of confuse yourself. But this week, I really did want to see how these guys compared in all of these different categories. So I went ball striking approach. So I doubled up there on approach because, again, I think that's so incredibly important. I did good drives because I'm okay if a guy's just barely off the fairway. I'm okay with that. Like I'm okay with that. Scrambling, around the green, I doubled up there again because, as Brad said, I want these dudes to be able to deal with the fact that these are small greens and they're not going to hold very often. Especially, it seems like we're going to get just enough wind, like 10 miles an hour, just enough to, if there's any sort of precipitation, to kind of go ahead and clear that out by Friday and Saturday. And these greens aren't going to hold. They're going to be super fast, and we're going to need to have guys that can scramble. So scrambling around the green, the 450 to 500 par fours, because eight of them come in that distance. So I went ahead and did that as well. I did sand saves because of all the friggin' bunkers that are on this course. So I wanted to see how these guys, and now these are all kind of become small percentages, right? Like, we're talking 5% of the model in sand saves, 5% in greens and regulation, mainly because I don't think these guys are going to be able to hold the green that often. But I do want to see, these guys that are able to do that even in conditions that don't allow for that. I did do 5% of driving distance just because, listen, length always helps. I don't think it's a priority this week, which is why it's so incredibly low. But I did want it there as a tiebreaker more than anything, because I have so much into driving accuracy with everything, because I also added fairways gained into the model, that I did want to see these guys that are also long, that also are high in fairways gained, are also good in good drives. I did bogey avoidance as well, because I don't want guys going out there and making a bunch of bogeys. And then finally, I did the proximity 175 to 200 as well. So literally, this is probably about 3 to 4 more categories than I ever put in a model. I think that you can get, I think you can get too into the weeds with all this and start to kind of confuse yourself and confuse what you're looking at. But I had a very, very specific approach. I went very driving approach heavy, very scrambling heavy, and then just a small percentage on the rest of this other stuff, just is more like tiebreakers, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I'm with you. A lot of the stats you guys have mentioned are the same ones that I used this week. And just to put a bow on it, I was looking for guys that hit the ball straight as an arrow, that will grind out pars, and if necessary, a bogey. I also have bogey avoidance in there at 15%, but I also added 5% for double bogey avoidance, because I think there's going to be holes here at this USGA. I'm not kidding, man. I think there's going to be holes that are close to a bogey in scoring average this week. So I think that, these guys that understand that at times bogey is a good score in the U.S. Open is important. So, but I'm with you. Good drives, fairways gained. I combined 20% on that. And yes, strokes gained around the green was important for me as well this week at 15%. Like we talk about often on these megapods, a well-rounded golfer. But for the first time that I can remember in a long time, I don't have much emphasis on driving distance. So that brings in a larger pool of players to consider than a typical U.S. Open for me, which made it much more challenging this week and has led me really to just try and take some shots on some bigger numbers if my belief is that driving distance isn't a prerequisite this time around.
So, Brad, I'm going to get into this middle tier here. And again, so I've seen pro and con arguments for basically all the guys we're about to mention here. Jordan Spieth, Will Zalatoris, Sam Burns, Matt Fitzpatrick, Colin Morikawa, Shane Lowry, Victor Hovland, Tony Finau, Joaquin Niemann. Basically, that tier is somewhere between about 25 to 28 to about 40 to 1. That mid tier, it seems like everybody has at least one player from this tier. It seems like there's a lot of people out there that have multiple players from this tier. Of those guys that I just named, and actually we can kind of, as we drift down a little bit, I mean, DJ fits in that category. We already talked about, we don't really like him. Max Homa kind of drifts into that category. Matsuyama, and the odds have actually dipped so far on Sung J M now that he actually fits in there as well, because best you can find on him is about 40 to 1 out there. So of that tier that we're talking about, one, did any of those guys make your card? And two, if not, why did some of these guys get eliminated? Because I think that a lot of people are going to hear, again, pros and cons from all these guys. And I want to try to give them as much of our commentary on why we either liked them or why we hated them.
Yes. So two, I will rule out off the top. Zalatoris, I made the case for him at the USPGA. Probably made the case for him at the Masters as well last time, but I don't think he's accurate enough. Driving accuracy is like below average in this field. So even though he shows up in the majors, he's not for me. Hovland is off the card or a fade just because of the chipping. And I'm sure that might be similar for you too, because I know we've spoken about that before, but he's, 100th best in this field around the greens. So those are two ruled out there. One, probably my favourite, there's two in the field, top 25 in driving accuracy, stroke gain approach, and around the green, the categories we just talked about. And top of that is Xander Schauffele, who's also got 5 straight top 7s in the US Open. So he's ticking the form box, and he's ticking kind of the course fit box. And the other interesting angle I thought was Pebble Beach, US Open there 2019. You will read a lot of the course previews about a lot of blind shots sort of around the contours of the earth, if you will, like, you literally can't see the green, there's a cliff in the way or whatever. And that to me sounds a lot like Pebble Beach, especially with these tiny greens as well. And Xander was top 5 in that US Open in 2019 that Gary Woodland won. And then also, if you just look at his recent form, what did he gain? He gained like 7.5 strokes tee to green last week as well. So he's striking it well as we speak. So just about everything I would look for, and you get around 25 to 1, maybe even higher if you look around.
So for me, definitely Hovland was instantly ruled out for me as well. I got to be honest, I don't know why. And Stephen, maybe you have something like, I didn't really consider Jordan Spieth this week. I don't really have a reason for or against him. I mean, we know in any given week, he can look like the best golfer on tour. And then any given week, he can look like a dude that is, basically like your good tour, like you're basically your good pro, at the club or something like that, the way that he's playing. So I don't know. I didn't get to him. I did put in a ticket on Zalatoris actually. And here's the thing that was confusing to me. And this is where I say that sometimes you can get a little confused by how many categories you start to consider. His driving accuracy, and especially if you look at like fairways gained, is one of the absolute worst in this field. But his good drives, and those are drives that even though they might not be on the fairway, the next shot, the approach shot, is either on the green or right on the fringe or whatever. So the guy has a putt at the hole on the next shot, and he's actually inside the top 20 in this field in that. And so it's like he's missing a lot, but I don't guess he's missing so badly that he can't do what needs to be done to get it to the green. And so Zalatoris, I reluctantly put in a ticket on him. I mean, look, the putting, we all know about the putting, but I just can't factor in putting's going to be difficult here. Someone's going to have to get hot with a putter and they'll probably win. So I just kind of leave that alone with everything. Of course, I always play Sam Burns, but I honestly, I love Sam Burns this week. He was high in every single one of the models that I ran. Sam Burns, arguably to me, and maybe not even arguably to you guys, has been the second best golfer in the world behind Scottie Scheffler over the last 18 months. And so the fact that you can get him at 30 to 1 right now, I think is just still absolutely insane. And then I went ahead and played Joaquin Niemann as well. So I literally have a bunch of outright plays in this tier. Joaquin Niemann, a guy that I think is right on the cusp. The win equity probably isn't as high as some of these other guys. Of course, Burns has won multiple times on tours. Zalatoris has been right there a couple of different times, but I do believe that Niemann is kind of right there on the cusp of everything. And if you look at his long-term numbers and his recent form, I mean, everything is just there except him being able to close the door on all of this. I mean, the guy is outside of fairways gained. I mean, he's literally inside the top 25 in nearly every single category in this field in the last 36 and 24 rounds. So those guys all made the card here, as did Max Homa, who, again, win equity. You want to talk about win equity? The guy's won 4 times already. And I think that his game, again, especially if you look at recent form, has really set up well for what we're looking for in this course. All of the stuff that we've talked about, Max Homa really ticks all of those boxes, especially when you start to get recent form over the last 24 rounds, 4th in this field in ball striking, 3rd in approach. He's 2nd in par 4s, 450 to 500 yards, 19th in driving distance, 23rd in bogey avoidance. So there are a lot of things. And even scrambling, he's 26th. So, I mean, he's still pretty good in something that we consider to be pretty important here. So I have a lot of plays from this tier. What about you?
I do too. And it was really hard to navigate. What I love about us doing this podcast is that we don't discuss it before we come on and do it.
Yeah.
And I start hearing a lot of things that I thought about the same way with Xander Schauffele. I don't know how you can eliminate Sam Burns this week with the form he's had. I mean, the guy was 2 shots off the lead going into the final round of the Canadian Open, shoots 65 and finishes even further behind. Yeah. Like Rory just went off.
I mean, seriously, I was telling this because, you know, whatever, he's from Louisiana. So all my friends root for him too. I was telling my friends, I'm like, if he didn't run into the buzzsaw that was that final round, like he wins that tournament. Like it's just, he ran into a buzzsaw. It just is what it is.
Right. And he won the Charles Schwab the week before that, T20 at the PGA, won the Valspar in March. So this tier is loaded full of good numbers and very good talent. It's just the nature of the PGA Tour right now in the world of golf, where there's so many guys that can win any given week. So if I don't go with Scotty Scheffler to round out my outright card, you know, I mentioned Xander, I mentioned Shane Lowry, Sam Burns is in consideration there. I'll throw it up on our Discord channel before the tournament starts if I do bet something pre-tournament. If not, I'm going to save it for a live bullet. But the other names that I consider in this tier, Matt and I are going to disagree on Colin Morikawa because the recent form is not good. 32nd and 27th in my rankings over his last 50 and 36 rounds. But if you turn on difficult scoring conditions, he catapults up to 1st and 4th. Now, admittedly, a lot of those rounds in difficult scoring conditions came when he was the hottest player on the planet last year. But I went further back, looked at some of his career statistics, the rounds he's put together. He's had 2 wins in his career where he didn't finish in the top 40 in the event before winning that event. So I do think Morikawa has the talent as a 2-time major winner to be able to figure it out and win a tournament like this. And if he's going to slip into the 30s, I have to bet him, even though the recent form is not there. So I did add him to my card. The 2 names that I actually have better confidence in than Morikawa at bigger numbers are Daniel Berger and Sung J M. Starting with Berger. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
I have both of those guys. I put them in this, like, maybe this net, because you can still find big numbers on Berger. You can't really on Sung Jae. So right. Yeah, like I had Berger kind of in that next tier of the like 50-1 and longer type deal. But talk about Sung Jae and then we'll circle back to Berger.
You got it. So I'm not going to lie. I have been waiting to bet on Sung Jae to win a major for a couple of years now, because I was lucky enough to cover the web.com tour, now the Korn Ferry Tour, the year Sung J M was on it, and became the first player in that tour's history to lead the money list every single week of the season. So this is a guy who, when the course gets tougher and the conditions get tougher, he gets better. He is 5th and 9th in the rankings I'm using this week over his last 50 and 36 rounds, but still 10th and 8th when he is in difficult scoring conditions in his last 36 and 24 rounds. And if you look at his high finishes in his career, 5 top 10s in Sung Jae's career where he finished single digits under par. So that tells you that was a difficult scoring tournament, and he still finished in the top 10, despite so many of these events on the PGA Tour calendar where you got to be closer to 20-1 to finish in the top 10. The win he had at the Honda was only 6 under par. The 3rd place finish he had at the Arnold Palmer, he only finished 3 under par. The 2 debut events he had as a professional on the Korn Ferry Tour in the Bahamas in ridiculously windy conditions, wins the event and comes in 2nd the very next week. This guy grinds. His statistics are fantastic off the tee. If you watch him in person, he hits the straightest ball you will ever see, and he is among the elite in this field in strokes gained around the green as well. I could not find anything to not like Sung J M this week.
I also have a ticket on Sung Jae. I'll put it this way. In my 50-round model, he's 4th overall. Wow. And again, and this is a factor that we just said we don't really care about all that much this week. It's just in there for me again as more of a, I want it in there to be able to see as a more of a tiebreaker type deal. He's 4th overall in the model, while being 62nd in the field in driving distance. So like we're talking about and that's one of the stats that we don't care about all that much. And he still ranks 4th for me overall. With all that, I mean, I guess my pushback, you said I was going to push back on Morikawa.
Yeah.
I mean, over his last 36 rounds, 79th in this field in scrambling, 116th in strokes gained around the green, 122nd in sand saves.
Yeah, it's Hovland, and then if you go
bad.
To it is Victor Hovland bad.
And then you go to his last 24 rounds, it gets even worse. 93rd in scrambling, 116th in strokes gained around the green, 133rd in sand saves. There's only 150 golfers and 15 are amateurs in this thing. 133rd in sand saves. He's so bad around the greens right now and so bad around there. I just don't think the rest of that stuff is going to help out. Brad, let's talk about some of these. I do want to talk about some of these other golfers and just get your overall thoughts on them that we didn't really hit on a ton. I mean, Matt Fitzpatrick, Shane Lowry, Tony Finau. These are all guys I'll just go ahead and admit I have Shane Lowry, Tony Finau, and I have placement market bets on all 3 of those. I don't have outrights on them, but what were your thoughts kind of on those guys as well?
So just to finish off the Sung Jae thought he was number 1 in my model. So I guess, pretty similar to you.
Are you going to bet him then? What are you doing? Like, what are you?
Yeah, I'll bet him. Of course,
okay.
I'll bet him.
All right.
I'll bet. Well, we're getting there. We're getting there, Matt. Shane Lowry, number 2 in the model, and also actually I haven't bet him yet. I'm going to. And why do we like Shane Lowry? One, there was some interesting work out there from, I think it was Pat Mayo was sharing it. He basically tabulated how players did on holes playing over par. So, kind of similar to, what you're just talking about with Sung Jae. How well do they play hard holes? Shane Lowry was top of that list, ahead of McIlroy, Rahm, Berger, Xander. So, the list checks out. Yeah. Shane Lowry's pretty good at that. I've got him best in the field at bogey avoidance. Number 2 is Sung Jae. And he's also 3rd in the field at proximity 175 to 200. And he's also 90th percentile, top 10% in the field in strokes gained approach. So also 5% better than the field in driving accuracy. So again, just everything we're talking about, he's got. And as I was saying earlier, it sounds a bit like this is going to be quite linksy with these blind shots, with lots of sort of, elevation changes, potential wind, 15 to 20 mile an hour wind on day 1 and 2, and a grind. And that's just Shane Lowry all over to me. So that sounds perfect for him. You could argue he's been the best player in this field that hasn't won this year, but he's had, he's got top 5s coming out of his ears. Like Sung Jae, I think came 2nd at the Honda, so he's played well at those tough courses as well. So yeah, like 28, 30 to 1 for Shane Lowry. I think he's a good bet.
What about Matt Fitzpatrick? This is a dude that, again, is all he does is go out and finish in the top 20 this year. I mean, like, the guy is a top 20 machine. I do question the win equity. I know he's won. I know he won on this course as an amateur, all this stuff. I get all this stuff, but I do question his win equity in like today's June of 2022. I do question his win equity in a field this strong with all of these guys out there. But where did you kind of land on Fitzpatrick?
Yeah, I mean, he fits the course, doesn't he? But I think the sort of solid finishes are priced in, right? He's 28 to 1. He's the same as Sam Burns and Zalatoris. And as you say, he's not won. Like you're watching that final round of the US PGA, and he produced nothing. If he was a horse, he would have run out of energy and faded at the finish. Like he doesn't look to me like he's got the killer instinct. However, sort of floppy that sounds. It's not backed by hard stats, but he's not done it. And do you want to bet 28 to 1 on him suddenly finding that and beating all of the best players in the world at that price? No. If he's 40 to 1, then and the place or the top 20 is a better price, then maybe, but it's just too short for me.
All right, so let's hit this next tier, and this is kind of like 50 to 1. And we'll call it like, 50 to 100. And then we can get into any bombs that we're looking at after that. Brooks Koepka, captain US Open. You can find him at 55 to 1 at one of the books out there. Cameron Young, who has just been one of the most ridiculous rookies we've seen in a long time, at 50 to 1. Daniel Berger is still available at 50 to 1. Corey Connors coming off a very, very solid Canadian Open. You can still find him at 60 to 1 out there. Billy Horschel, who listen, I'll admit this is just a bias because I just don't like him and I don't like to watch him play. And I can't imagine having a sweat on him and then like him like not winning the tournament. And then I already hate him. And then I have to like then hate him even more because he didn't finish out the tournament or something. But he's at 55-1. Tommy Fleetwood, you can find at 65-1. Mito Pereira off a fantastic season he's got going on. You can find him at 66-1 as well. Justin Rose coming off of the 58 watch that ended up being a 60. You can find him at 70. Louis at 75. Harold Varner you can find at 65. And then Davis Riley, another guy that has just been on fire this season, you can find as high as 80-1 out there. Steven, let's talk about this tier here. Did any of those golfers make your card? And if not, did any of them come close, or were there any that were you just eliminated somewhere along the way? I actually know the answer already because you tipped your hand. Yeah,
for sure. We'll get into Daniel Berger here. The only other name that I was tempted by was Mito Pereira at 66-1. He's still, I was really impressed after that heartbreak at the PGA Championship to see his results in his next two tournaments. I thought that showed a lot of mental toughness to be able to do that. And he fits to a T on this. So that's going to be the one regret I have in this tier is if he comes back and wins that major because he does fit really well. But Daniel Berger, very similar profile I observed to Sung Jae Im. Really hard to find any blemishes in the statistics that I was looking at this week for Daniel Berger. Really top 60 across the board, elite in strokes gained on approach over his last 50 and 36 rounds. And the numbers still like him if you turn on difficult scoring conditions, even though we're looking at, further back in time when you do that. So he fits nicely. If it gets windy, I'm not really too concerned about him. And the only concern I've really had with Berger this season after he melted down and admittedly should have won the Honda Classic. I think he was up 5 or 6 shots in the final round before he blew it. But health was my only concern with Berger. And that was wiped away with him playing in not only the two of the 3 events leading up to this tournament, but played in back-to-back weeks in the Schwab and the Memorial and had a top 5 finish in the Memorial. So I have full confidence that he's healthy. I have full confidence that his profile fits at this course. And he, like some of the top tier in this field, was close enough for me to like him at 50 more than maybe betting one of the top guys at sub 20.
Yep, I have Daniel Berger on the card as well. And here's what I did this is where I went back and relied more on the older data than the newer data, because if you look at some of the more recent stuff, the guy was playing hurt and he wasn't in good form. And as you mentioned, he has said he feels better. He has shown the results as of late that he feels better. So if you go back on the 50 round model for me, Daniel Berger's 6th overall, and there's actually nothing to nitpick on him other than driving distance, which again, we don't care about all that much this week. And so I went back and I relied on kind of the older information with Daniel Berger, and he also did, in fact, make the card. What about you, Brad? Anybody in that 50 to kind of sub 100 before we get to triple digits that made your card?
I will give you a couple. So I said earlier there were 2 players in the field, top 25 in driving accuracy, strokes gained approach, and strokes gained around the green. One was Xander Schauffele, and the other one much lower down, probably around 100-1, actually, just going over your threshold there. But Russell Henley is the other one with those that fits that parameter. Top 5th in the field, strokes gained approach. And so, but yeah, he's just got elite irons, but he also just hits the fairway every time. Again, he's another one where, do you want to trust him in contention? Probably not. But if you're looking at a top 20 bet, I think he's going to be out of trouble compared to a lot of people off the tee.
So I do have a 75-1 on Cam Young. It was a bet that I made like 3 months ago when I saw that this guy was just tearing it up, and I figured he might be way shorter. So I went ahead and grabbed the 75-1. He's shorter. He's not way shorter. You can still find him at 50. I think 50 is fine for Cam Young. I don't think it's the greatest in the world. Like if you could still find a 70 or 75, I would say like I would still recommend the bet at 50. Steven, like Cam Young, it's like at 50, it's like, would I rather have Berger? I would. Would I rather even have like Mito at 66 over a 50 at Cam? Probably so as well. So like, I think it's like, we only have so much money to distribute to outrights. And so at the current number, if you love him, I still think it's playable. If you're on the fence, I don't think 50 is quite long enough for Young.
If his form right now was coming into one of the last couple of U.S. Opens we had, I'd love him to death. But and full disclosure, I did put a free bet on him like a month ago at 200 to 1 to win the U.S. Open.
Right.
So I'm still rooting for the guy. But
right, me too. Right.
But I think that this particular U.S. Open track isn't going to suit him as good as the last few U.S. Open tracks that we're used to. So I think that's what we saw in the Masters and in the PGA Championship with this wide open spaces and a bomber being able to hit just the junk out of the ball, and these longer holes being an advantage for him. So I still think he can contend. I think he's been playing unbelievable golf, but his accuracy off the tee isn't quite, it's good. It's above average, but it's not quite elite like some of the other names we've been talking about.
And Brad, listen, we have to bring it up because there's no other handicap other than, are you going to play him or are you not going to play him? You're obviously not playing him, but look, Brooks Koepka, you can get him at 55 to 1. The only handicap here, you can't look at his statistics. The handicap here is he destroys hard fields. He shows up in majors, and for whatever reason, he just plays his best golf against the best competition. I didn't get there. I think 55 to 1 is probably an egregious number. It's like I probably should put a small bet on it just because this is what this guy does, but I haven't done it.
No, well, I left it alone as well. Like he's not done anything for months now. I mean, he was top 5 in that Pebble Beach US Open I was looking at earlier. But you know, you are reliant on him just showing up and producing some magic, and
right,
you know, it's not a punt I was willing to take this time around.
If the narrative, if the narrative was still true on Brooks Koepka that he turns it on in the majors, then he wouldn't have missed the cut at the Masters and finished T55 at the PGA Championship. He's been searching for it for a while now.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's get into what I would consider long shots here. I mean, anything over triple digits. I mean, if you're hitting that, that's a long shot. A long shot doesn't have to be the 200, 300, 250 to 1, something like that. So, look, 100 to 1, triple digits or longer. Guys, listen, let's talk about the guys that are super incredibly popular in this range. There are 3 of them that come to mind. The very first one is Aaron Wise. This guy is getting a massive amount of love. You can still find him at 100 to 1. He completely crapped the bed last week, but Tyrrell Hatton, you can still find at 100 to 1. There are people who really, really like him at that number. Tyrrell Hatton, I mean, triple digits. Again, if he had even shown up a little bit last week, maybe he's more in that, like, you know, consensus, like 50, 60, 70-ish range, where right now, again, you can still find him at 100 to 1. And then the other name that continues to kind of pop up whenever you do talk about these longer shots here is Adam Scott for whatever reason. He always seems to have one good round in these tournaments and then never puts together 4 good rounds, but people always want to make a case for Adam Scott at 100 to 1 plus, something like that. Guys, I'll admit, like, as we sit right now, I don't have a bomb on my card. I'm going to add a couple. Most likely the name that comes to mind is Luke List, that I can find at 180 to 1 out there. Look, we all know the guy can't putt his way out of a paperback. I get that, but I just need his putting to be okay. Like, I just need him to like find fire in that putter for, you know, a week. It's basically all I'm asking from this guy, because really outside of that, he checks a lot of the boxes that we're looking for in some of this stuff. It's just, you know, again, he's just so incredibly bad. Like, you know, outlier good putting things, like I put away. Outlier bad putting things I put away. Most people fall somewhere in the middle, but if you are just consistently terrible, which he is, then, you know, that just means you're bad at something, and he's terrible at it. But that being said, with as many other boxes as he ticks, I think I'm probably going to have to add him there to the card. Steven, I know you're on Wise. Is there any other like triple digit bombs that you're on?
Kevin Na was the only other. I found a 220 to 1 on him. Not in love with it, but I mean, we're talking about lunch money here to win a couple grand. So I like a short
What do you
game.
like about Wise?
And Wise, I like that every time he has shown up for me this season on the PGA Tour, even going back to last season, it has been at a difficult course where the scoring has been more difficult. And the numbers back that up. If you turn on for this week, more difficult scoring conditions, he gets a little bit higher in the model. So I like that he's a grinder. Now, I will say this. If you look a little bit more in detail at the numbers that are pumping him up, it's not the numbers I would prefer because he's still outside the top 40 in good drives and fairways gained, and he's middle of the road and strokes gained around the green. So it's been the iron play. It's been the scoring on 500 plus par fours. He's been really good on strokes gained on par 3 scoring. So it's been that approach game that's really carried him. And if these greens are if they're repelling balls like we expect, then this might not be the best setup for him. But at 120 to 1, I had to throw at least a few bucks on it.
Yeah, he might end up as a top 40 bet for me. I just don't know about the win equity with all the stuff that you just said, right? Like, it's just, I think at some point, something of that breaks down to where I don't think he's able to get home, but he seems like a pretty good top 40-ish
I did
type
bet him
bet
top 40 at plus money.
Yeah. Yeah, he seems like that type of bet to me, and I agree with you there. Like that, I think is probably some good value there. Brad, you're always good for some long shots here. Give us a couple of triple digits that are in your on your card already. I know you got some.
Well, for starters, I bet some Wise as well.
Okay,
and yeah, I think that the top 20 stuff is good stuff. I think a bit like Zalatoris, he's one who's good for the majors because the ball striking is so good. He made 6 straight cuts at majors, 2 straight top 25s as well. So the top 40 we're talking about is good.
Right.
For the real long shots, one is kind of in the Brooks Koepka category. He's Webb Simpson, who's got some decent US Open form.
Okay.
3 straight top 20s at the US Open and then missed the cut last year. But he's also been struggling with injuries this year. So he's not going to pop on any of these models. He's not going to pop on your data golf models or whatever. But to me, he looks like he's showing a bit of sign of life. He's gained more than 3.5 strokes tee to green in the last 2 events, which he hasn't done for a couple of years. And then obviously you can always rely on Webb Simpson to putt. So yeah, just 110 to 1 right now on Bet365. And that's just probably too big considering, if you assume that he hasn't been injured, he was going off, say, 50 to 1 for this 2 years ago, right? So, yeah, I think potentially a bit of sleeper value.
Another guy that I will just kind of bring up because one of the guys that if you follow our Discord, you know the name Brett Colson, he put his picks in there, and I went and looked. Ryan Fox is a guy that I went and took a look, and I'm like, okay, well, what's going on here? This guy's got 2 wins on the DP Tour. He's 6th overall. He's actually 63rd in the official world golf rankings. So, I mean, a guy that's kind of under the radar here. He's 63rd in the official world golf rankings. Then you go and you look at kind of this guy's recent form, right? Tournament in April the 30th, T9, May the 7th, T8, May the 14th, T2, May the 28th, outright second. Like, this guy is like a top 10 machine in these tours, like outside of the United States, and so it made me look a little further into him, and he's a scorer, he's a player, and I'm not going to say, definitely go and put, money on him to win this thing or something, but you can find 300 to 1 if you did want to go that route, but maybe a very solid bet for a big plus money top 40 and an even bigger plus money top 20 type deal if he's able to translate some of that success over here to the United States. So just another name that our team has kind of dug up here, and certainly a guy that is coming in some pretty great form in all of this.
Matt, can I add to that real quick?
Yeah.
I also bet Ryan Fox to top 40 at plus 250 odds. When Brett Colson, our Fearless director, throws out a name that none of us were thinking about, it gets our attention. So I saw what you saw with the amazing World Tour form, the former European Tour. What I couldn't quite get there on a top 20 or a top 10, because if you dig into his numbers a little bit more, he's 148th in driving accuracy on that tour. So likely he's bombing and having very, short, rough and easy courses. But the form is there. So top 40 at plus 250 was pretty good for me. To Brad's point on Webb Simpson, it was one of that small list of guys that if you turned on difficult scoring, he skyrocketed up the rankings in the model for me this week. And one more triple digit name we haven't mentioned, Keegan Bradley. And I know we joke about him because he melts down constantly, but I'm going to have a first round leader bet on him at 70-1. I'm going to have a first round top 5 bet on him at 11-1 at our show sponsor BetMGM, where ties are paid out in full on those bets, because he may only be in that 25 to 30 range on the model this week, but in difficult scoring conditions, he got a little bit better. And if you look at the stats across the board, there's no red. It is a well-rounded profile for Keegan Bradley this week. I didn't have any putting in the model, but he's also been putting pretty well too, which has been the Achilles heel for him. So another name to think about.
Brad, any placement mark? I know that's not really a thing that you get over there, because you get each way and all that, and that you get all the glories of being able to bet like that for golf. But I mean, I guess let's put it this way. If you were to put, a bet in on a guy that you couldn't quite get there on an outright, but maybe if you did bet top 20s and top 40s and things like that, is there any kind of golfers that come to mind that that didn't quite make your card, but you could certainly see them having a pretty decent tournament?
I'll have bet some Keegan Bradley 80-1 with let's go with the places. So you can assume I like the top 20 as well. And it's another one who suits the majors because he strikes it so long and so straight that he's always in play. So again, it's similar to what we're talking about with Zalatoris or Russell Henley. While everyone else is sort of flailing around in the cabbage, where normally if you miss the fairway on a PGA Tour event, you're okay. You can the rough isn't deep enough to cause real trouble. Where that's not the case in the majors, and that is not going to be the case this week. And that's where Keegan Bradley, I think he doesn't need to score. He doesn't need to win a putting contest because he can't do it. But these greens are so small that it takes a lot of the 3 putts off the table, because if you're on the green, you're close enough to putt it in too. So I just think it does set up really nicely for him to just plod his way around, finish -4 with a few birdies, few bogeys, and that's going to be good enough for a top 20 in my view.
I'll tell you, for me, there are some reluctant placement bets that I made, but listen, I just couldn't argue with where these guys showed up for me on the model. So I just kind of, look, sometimes you just have to trust the numbers. I don't like to do that all the time, but I do have placement market bets on Billy Horschel, even though I hate watching him play golf. I have placement market bets on Harold Varner III, which, by the way, I hate watching him play golf too because of the meltdown factor with him. But, listen, there is a really, really good. I mean, when you look at like a Billy Horschel, right? I mean, you're getting top 30. You're at even money. You're getting top 20 at nearly, at 2-1, over 2-1 on him for that. And again, he's a guy that just pops, in all these categories that we're kind of looking at with everything. And then Harold Varner III, you can actually get plus money on him as a top 40 finish, so even if he does have a one meltdown round, if he's sitting T8 when he has the meltdown, he's at least going to finish in the top 40 for you there. So I have him as well. Those are kind of reluctant ones. I have top 10 bets, which I rarely make. I typically stay to top 20, but I have top 10 bets on Xander, Lowry, and Finau. I think top 10 Tony is back for Finau. He was a guy that I was fading for the longest time, but his game really, really has started to come around here. I don't know if it's back to where he, might actually challenge to win tournaments or anything again. But I think top 10 Tony's back. So I got a top 10 bet on him. I love Lowry this week in the top 10 market, and I love Xander this week in the top 10 market Top 20 bets, a lot of those will fall on a lot of the outrights that I had. So again, if you followed along, I have outrights on Justin Thomas, Zalatoris, Sam Burns, Matt Fitzpatrick, Max Homa, Joaquin Niemann, Daniel Berger, Sung J M. Like most of those guys, I'll have a top 20 bet on as well. It's kind of a fallback considering we don't get each way betting here. It at least makes me feel a little bit better if I get a good performance out of my guy that doesn't end up in a win for me. First round leader bets, Mito Pereira, Will Zalatoris, Joaquin Niemann. Those are also the Zalatoris and Niemann bets are a little bit of emotional hedge bets for me because they always seem to have one awesome round and then figure out how to not win a tournament. So I do have first round leader bets on Zalatoris and Niemann. I just love what Mito brings to the table. I'll have a top 20 bet on Mito as well as he's been playing. He really does tick all the boxes here. And I like the fact that he took a little bit of rest and is coming back here and doing this. So the only other bet I have, guys, it's a completely just ridiculous, but let's have some fun here. I bet yes at plus 330 on there being a playoff in this tournament. And mainly because if we're talking about a super low scoring tournament and we're talking about a slog and we're talking about no one's going to run away with it, if the winning score here is 5 under or 6 under or 7 under, there's a chance that there are multiple guys that can kind of hang in that area there. So I did take a little flyer on a yes on there being a playoff at plus 330. That's more of just a fun bet for me.
Matt, I'm not going to lie. I got like 35 bets in this tournament and I'm terrified, but I'm also extremely excited. So I'm going to save most of them for our Discord. If you just go to thelines.com, hit the Discord button in the top right corner, you'll see all of our bets under the Golf Staff Bets channel. But every major, I love to give you some of these like top nationality prop markets that I love. So I'm getting Sung J M as the top Korean at even money. And he only has to beat 2 guys that are outside the top 30 in the model this week to do that. So love the plus there. Love him at plus 250 to be the top Asian in the U.S. Open, which is basically the same thing as the top Korean market, except that you just have to beat Hideki Matsuyama as well. And we're getting better than twice the price there. So a couple others as well. You tweeted, Matt, humorously that you're looking for any head-to-head you could possibly find against Phil Mickelson because the guy is just like, walking around Brookline with a tail between his legs in embarrassment or shock or he ain't there, man. He just shot 10 over in a live event in 3 rounds, and now he's got to face the toughest test in golf. If you look around, you can find a top senior market where Mickelson is like an overwhelming favorite against the only other 2 seniors in Jim Furyk and some 57-year-old sectional qualifier who has only played like 3 senior tour events this year. But given the fact that Mickelson's a friggin' mess, you can bet both of those guys and get either even money if Jim Furyk wins, if you do the math, or better than 2-1 if God, I'm blanking on his name, Fran something maybe, but he's 57-year-old sectional qualifier who
Fran Quinn.
Yes, thank you, Fran Quinn. So the guy, but I had to include him in the bet because he actually did perform better than Jim Furyk by a pretty wide margin in the one senior tour event they both played. So we're digging deep here, man. But the other thing I'll mention is if you can find some a top Scandinavian market where Victor Hovland is favored over the field. We've talked about how much of a mess he is around the green. So if he's favored over the field in any type of prop market, that's worth taking a shot on some of the other guys. So I took a shot on Olesen at 6-1 to be the top Scandinavian. And along those same lines, Louis Oosthuizen is plus 160 favorite to be the top South African. His form has been shit. What we rely on with him with his irons has not been good. Didn't look particularly impressive in the live fraudulent golf tournament last week in London. So you could take a shot on somebody at a really nice number in the top South African market. I'm going with Sean Norris, who is top 80 in the world golf rankings and has played pretty well overseas. He's got 3 top 10 finishes, including a win on the DP World Tour this year. So at plus 750, that was worth a little bit of lunch money as well.
All right, guys, we're going to close this out with the same 2 questions I ask every single week. Brad, regardless of your bet, like we're not talking about your bets because, we bet differently because, we based on odds and things like that. Remove your bets from it. When all is said and done on Sunday, who do you think actually wins the tournament?
I think Shane Lowry wins the golf tournament.
Oh boy. All right. That's spicy. That's spicy right there. Okay. Steven, who wins the golf tournament?
I was tempted by Lowry too, but I think he's going to win the Open at St. Andrews. So I'm saving that for a month from now. So I think Sung J M is the U.S. Open champion.
Oh, when it's all said and done. Guys, I know this is a ridiculously chalky answer, but I just love everything about what's going on right now with Justin Thomas. And I think when it's all said and done, Justin Thomas is going to win this thing so long as he can find the fairways. And listen, I think there'll be some holes where he's long enough he can use less than driver. And I just really do like what we're getting with Justin Thomas right now. And then the final question that we love so much, and I'm going to cheat because I'll start here because there's 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Who, if they win the tournament, are you going to have the most self-loathing? I can tell you right now. First and foremost, it's going to be Jordan Spieth because I didn't even consider him. Like literally, I didn't even consider Jordan. Like not 1 second did I consider putting a bet on Jordan Spieth. So it's going to be one of the guys is Jordan Spieth for sure. The second guy for sure for me, if he actually wins this thing, is going to be Scotty Scheffler because it's like, hey, why didn't I just bet on the best golfer in the world over the last 18 months? What am I doing? Why is this like, this was easy. The answer to the test is bet the best golfer in the world. Like, and I didn't do that. And the last one for me is going to be Davis Riley because he popped in the top 15 in every single version of my model. And I have not bet him for whatever silly ass reason. I don't know why I have not bet him or whatever. And you can find him at like 80, 85 to 1 or something like that. So I think those 3 guys, I will hate myself the most if they actually win this tournament. Brad, what about you?
I'll give you 2 answers. One is Matsuyama. I'm looking at a 35 to 1, and he's someone who you would think fits perfectly, but I've just not bet him. Maybe because of the injury stuff, right?
Right.
Or this weird disqualification. I don't know. So if he turns up and wins it, I'll be annoyed. Now the other one is Rahm. So I've got a friend who bets golf for a living. Got his own model, bit of an autistic chap. Loves it. And he has been betting Jon Rahm for the last 6 months. And this week, for the first time, he said, I'll make him fair value. So I'm sure Jon Rahm is going to go and win the golf tournament for the first time in 6 months.
It's like we said, you can still find a 15 to 1 on Jon Rahm out there. What about you, Steven? Who wins this tournament and you're going to hit the whiskey bottle?
I will actually have no regrets if Brooks Koepka wins this tournament, despite the fact that only 4 players have had better scores than him in his last couple of U.S. Opens because he sucked ass and he just went to an island somewhere and was doing karaoke piss drunk after his wedding. So I just don't think he's, there. And I don't think he's particularly concerned about getting there. So, but the guys that I would be hitting the whiskey bottle on would be Scotty Scheffler, but I still might fire on him. The fact that we're getting close to double the number of what he was a month ago when he went on that crazy Tiger Woods tear of wins in a short period of time is silly to me. He hasn't done anything to warrant that other than some really recent bias from some of these other golfers that have won with JT and Rory McIlroy. But Shane Lowry will just be a swift kick in the pants, man, because I had him at the Honda Classic and all of a sudden, the great flood happened and on the 72nd hole of the tournament and he couldn't make birdie on an easy par 5. So he didn't get to a playoff. And then he chipped one into the water on a par 3 and wherever the hell that swamp tournament was and was in the mix until the end there. So I feel like I should already have 2 Shane Lowry outright wins this year. And if he goes and wins this tournament when he's like top 5 in my model this week across every timeline, God, I'm going to be pissed, even though I have a top 20 bet on him.
I know. Guys, Steven did an awesome page over on thelines.com where you can get every single market that's available out there and you can shop the odds. It'll just show you the best odds available for all those. Of course, you can just go to the odds page as well if you just want to shop on your own and see every single book and what they're offering. And then, of course, our prop finder is by far, if you're just looking for specific golfers and you have a guy that you have in mind that you want to bet, then go to the prop finder and type his name in, and it shows you the best price that's possibly available out there. So be sure and take advantage of that as well. As Steven mentioned a little bit earlier, upper right-hand corner is a Discord button. Get in the Discord, come in, talk some golf with everybody in there. And of course, you can look in the golf picks channel as well. And anything that we add along the way, we throw in there as well. Guys, follow Brad over on the Twitter machine at Brad Allen NFL. You can follow Steven at Steven Andress1. You can follow me at Matt Brown M2. Good luck on all your U.S. Open bets.